transmitting from Sector 14845. By the authority of the Guardians of the Universe, Blog of Oa Lanterns Myron Rumsey and Bill Giancoli proclaim the podcast of Oa. You have been chosen to receive this transmission because you are without fear.
The podcast of
Welcome back to the podcast of Oa. This is episode 120. I'm Bill Giancoli, and I'm here with Myron Rumsey, the guardian and the creator of the blog of Oa and the podcast of Oa. My friend, Myron Rumsey, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well, Bill. This is a bit of a bittersweet episode because this is your final episode with us.
It is.
So, next episode we won't be hearing your voice again.
No, you won't be hearing my voice. I'll record like a bumper so you can, some kind of like cool little bumper.
It'll be the ghost of Bill talking.
Yeah,
it'll be the ghost of co-host past.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I'll do it from the Indigo tribe.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, but Myron,
it's Black Lantern Bill.
Black Lantern Bill, yes. But Myron, yes. Thank you for, really creating the blog of Oa to start with, and then even just meeting me sight unseen. God, it has to be almost 10 years now.
Yeah, it's been about 10 years.
Yeah, so like 10 years, so. I was running an online radio station, and we met at the local comic shop. Actually, the comic, Jared, our comic shop person, kind of put us in contact. We talked about a podcast and everything there. You were kind of trying to feel me out where I'm at.
Could you rephrase that a little bit?
Okay, sorry, not feel me out, but grope me. Is that what you're
right? Come on, get it right.
Yeah, no, it's yeah. You were, I think you were kind of like, okay, what's this guy all about? Online radio. What is he talking about? And we kind of said, yeah, we'll exchange emails. Nothing big there. And then I walk into an interview at our current organization, and you're sitting there interviewing me.
That was the start of it. That was actually your trial for the podcast. I didn't care about the job. I was interviewing you for the podcast.
I thought those were odd questions.
Now, can you do this lesson in a radio voice? No.
Yeah. Let's say welcome back 120 times. Let's see if you can nail it.
But that was the start of it. And the very first episode was talking about the Green Lantern movie. So we started on a high note.
Yeah, we went to the midnight showing, and then we took the day off work. Can we say, we can say that now? It's been a while.
The statute of limitations is up on it. Yeah,
I know, we're good.
Okay.
I don't want to get docked to vacation day. So we took the day off, and we recorded that day, and I think we did that was one of our longer episodes where we talked about the Lantern movie.
Yeah, that was the start of it. So see, something did come out of that movie.
Yeah, I know. I know we've actually had longer running episodes than we've been running longer than the Green Lantern movies franchise.
Yeah.
So with that being said, we do have a show tonight. I'm glad that Myron, you've found somebody, and we're going to talk about that soon, but we're also going to talk about comics tonight, and then I will bid everyone adieu.
All right, we'll be back after the break, and we'll start talking about some news and notes, and then get into comics.
What up, dweebs? This is Guy Gardner. You're listening to the podcast of Oa.
So, Myron, we do have some news and notes in the Green Lantern universe, and so we're going to start off with, my kind of, again, I think you put it best, bittersweet news.
Yeah.
This is my last episode. We talked about how it all got started, and it's been great. I'm just kind of going on to kind of raising my kids, doing soccer practices, and just working on other creative things. And I think at this time, I'm just happy I've been able to do it. We've put in at least over 120 hours at the bare minimum.
Absolutely. And it's sad news that you're going on. This has been 7 years. And you've got the 7-year itch. You're looking for a much younger podcast with a convertible.
Yeah. A podcast who gets me, man.
But the good news is I did find someone to take over in your stead while you're gone.
Well, that was nice.
It's a rebound co-host. But the new co-host name is Phil Bova, and Phil is we'll introduce him next episode. And Phil is a school teacher who actually teaches a class on comic books, and he meets my number one criteria. Bill, his name Phil rhymes with Bill and makes it easy for me to remember.
Well, that's great. I can't wait to introduce you to my Nova Core podcast host, Brian. No, I think it's great. You've told me good things about Phil, and I think he expressed an interest, and I think that's going to be awesome. And I can't wait to hear you guys and listen to what you guys do. And I think you're going to have a blast. I'm glad to hear it's going to keep going, because Myron, the amount of effort you put in to just the blog, and then to take that and still have the time to put in a quality podcast, and now where else, which we're, I think, everywhere now. You can get this podcast anywhere.
Yeah, pretty much any outlet that's got any kind of podcast, whether it's Spreaker or Stitcher or you pick your we're on it. And speaking of being everywhere, I'm going to be on another podcast called iHeartGeek. They are going to be doing a special Blackest Night episode, and I'm recording with them this weekend to talk about Blackest Night. So I'm excited about that stuff too. So, but in other Green Lantern news, kind of a surprise. I mean, we saw in the solicitations for books coming out over the summer that Tim Seeley was going to leave Green Lanterns and Dan Jurgens was going to take over starting with issue 50. But then this past week, it just got announced that the issue that came out this week, issue number 47 of Green Lanterns, is Tim Seeley's last episode. So we have a relative newcomer by the name of Aaron Gillespie. He came out of the DC Writers Workshop of 2016. He's done a few comics, obviously, since then, but he's going to step in for issues 48 and 49. So the big question, of course, is he going to be writing the same story that Tim Seeley was going to write, or is he going to do something different? So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting. But the other thing...
So... who's taking over again? Dan Jurgens completely?
Yep, Dan Jurgens will be taking over with issue 50. But what we don't know is, we know that issue 50 of Hal Jordan in the Green Lantern Corps is going to be Robert Venditti's last issue. And there are rumors swirling around. The big rumor is Grant Morrison is going to be on the book. I don't know how. Wow. Yeah, I don't know how true that is. I just hope. I don't know which version of Grant Morrison is going to show up, if it is him. But we should know that. We're recording on a Thursday night. We should know this following Monday when the solicitations come out, I would think, because that solicitation is going to have issues 50 and 51 for Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps. So who's writing 51? Who knows? There are kind of lots of rumors swirling. One of the rumors is that, with the writers changing and so on, that the books are going to be going to $3.99 and once a month instead of being twice a month. There's rumors they're going to be breaking up Simon Baz and Jessica Cruz. There's all kinds of rumors, and I think any of them are as valid options as any other one. So I'm not spending any energy about any one of these things at this point. I'm just interested in seeing what happens. When you look at the sales numbers, and sales numbers are always kind of thrown off, because what you see when you look at sales numbers is you see what stores are ordering, not what they've actually sold. There's no real good metric for that. And then that doesn't account for digital sales, and it doesn't account for the trade sales. But when you look at the just the sheer floppies.
And no way to track digital?
Well, they if they do, they don't release it in any way we can see it, and I don't even know if they have a way of tracking it. There's got to be a way. The Comixology and Amazon. Yeah, you would think that Amazon that owns Comixology would have stats for those things, and if they do, they're just not shared in a public fashion like Diamond pre-orders are. But again, it's a misnomer because it's not the books that are being sold; it's the books that are being ordered. So if a store is ordering more books, twice as many books as they sell, you're inflating the sales figures that get reported. But when you look at the sales for both of the Green Lantern books, they are, I think, right now the bottom two selling twice monthly series for DC.
Both of them?
Both of them, yeah. Green Lanterns is at the bottom of the pack, and Hal Jordan is the next one up. A couple of series that were lower than them have since been canceled. So
what's like out of all the whole DC lineup?
Yeah.
Oh wow! I mean, I didn't know. I could Green Lanterns. You know me. Yeah, I can see that. I don't know about Hal Jordan. I didn't realize Hal Jordan.
And remember, I'm only talking about the books that are twice monthly. So there are a lot of monthly books that sell lower. But when you look at the twice monthly books, they're at the bottom of those series. And there's only about maybe 4,000 copies between them. So when you look at the Hal Jordan books, the lowest Hal Jordan, the lower of the two books that sells in a month, is about 4,000 copies higher than the higher of the two Green Lantern books. Green Lanterns issues, I should say. That sounded confusing, I'm sure. But there's a significant gap. But still, those two series, when you look at DC's twice monthly books, they're the low man on the totem pole right now. So I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying low man on the totem pole, probably. But because that's where we live in right now. But it is. But anyway, so people are saying it's time for a shakeup. It's time for some creative changes, and bringing Grant Morrison on, that would certainly do some shaking up of things. And Dan Jurgens, he's no stranger to writing big things. I'm not sure how he'll be writing the Green Lanterns book. We'll find out. But some people are saying, well, Dan Jurgens is just a placeholder until they do a relaunch. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I know something has to happen, obviously, and I think something has to happen to reinvigorate this franchise because it's just not doing what it could be doing, and we'll see. Yeah. The other big news is DC announced their streaming service, DC Universe. So they're going to have some live action shows. I think they announced. I keep wanting to say Suicide Squad, and I know that's not what it is, but there's some live action series that are going to be on it. There's going to be the returning Young Justice cartoon. That's going to be on it. So
same like that was on just back when the Green Lantern animated series was on.
Yeah,
same style.
Exactly. Yeah, the exact same show.
Wow.
Same creators are going to be involved, and it's going to pick up right where it left off. Doom.
All right.
It's a live action Doom Patrol. I had to remember that, or I was going to kill myself for not getting it right. Not literally. But I'm one of those people that if I can't remember something, I sit there and I spend all this brain energy until I find it, and I'll wake up at 2:00 in the morning and it's like it's Doom Patrol. So I had to
yeah. I can see Deb like, oh, what? Like,
it's like what the
Doom
hell?
Patrol.
Yeah,
grab the shotgun.
So I had to Google it now to save my wife the trouble. But with the talk about the Young Justice animated series, of course, people are saying, well, what about Green Lantern the animated series? I mean, it did well in terms of ratings.
Right.
The only thing that held it back was the financial side of it. And maybe if you transition from CGI to a traditional art style, maybe you could do it. And, not all the same creators are going to be there. Giancarlo Volpe is no longer working with Warner Brothers. I think he's working for Disney now. And but Jim Krieg is still working at Warner Brothers. He's one of the showrunners for Justice League Action. So you could, and maybe Giancarlo could be enticed back over. It's hard to say. Giancarlo humorously posted a video on YouTube. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. But he has a video of him reacting to the news that Young Justice is coming back and it's going to be on DC Universe. And he's like, oh, this is great for the creators and great for the voice actors and great for the fans. And he gets all sad all of a sudden. And it starts playing that song. Everybody's sad, everybody cries or whatever it is. And he's wiping the faux tears away with a Green Lantern the Animated Series Blu-ray case. But there's a call on social media. A lot of people. I joined up with the Green Lantern the Animated Series. There's a it's not a blog, and it's Tumblr site, and they wanted to start a hashtag up to try to get people to let the DC Universe channel know that Green Lantern fans and animation fans would like to see that show back. So if you're out on social media, whether it's Facebook or Twitter, look up the DC Universe, and I'll put the links to their Facebook page and their Twitter handle very nicely and very professionally. Just let them know that, hey, I'd like to see this show come back. If you're looking for more content, we'd like to see Green Lantern, the animated series, back on the air. And, they could rerun the repeats from the first season and then launch it into a second season. So, it's not real. I wouldn't really say this is news, but I think it's a fan effort. And if like me, you love that show, we talked earlier about the podcast being something good that came out of the movie. And I don't mean to knock the movie, because I did enjoy it, but it wasn't what I think it should have been. But if it weren't for that movie, we wouldn't have had the animated series either. And the animated series, to me, is probably the best depiction in a non-printed format for Green Lantern ever. So, if you feel that way and as strongly as I do, please go out there and let them know, because the more voices they hear, the more likelihood we have of this potentially becoming a reality.
Yeah, I mean, what could it hurt?
That's right. The most that'll happen is they'll ignore us and make a Booster Gold animated series or something.
I don't know. I'd watch it.
I would too.
But there's part of me too. Okay, here's just thinking out. Just kind of being somewhat devil's advocate. What if it did come back, but it just didn't seem to live up to how good that first couple seasons were? Yeah,
there's always that potential,
because it was such a complete story with just enough to hang it open, but I felt like I was full at that point, that when it did end, I didn't feel cheated at all.
I didn't feel cheated. I just wanted more.
Well, exactly. You want more, but there's part of me that is like, oh, it'd be awesome if it did come back. But then what if it comes back and then you're like, oh, they just couldn't get the guy, who played Guy back. Or something, like little things that just cause it to just kind of lack a little bit. And that might be, I don't know, that's me being pessimistic, but oh well. I just hope it'd be cool if it does come back.
Yeah, we'll see. But if you believe it, you want to see it, let them know. All right, well, let's take a quick break, and we will come back, and we will start talking some comics.
This is Salak, Green Lantern of Sector 1418, and you are receiving the podcast of Oa.
The podcast of Oa.
So, Bill, we've got the first arc of Robert Venditti's 3-arc epic ending to his run on Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps. And, this is all about the Darkstars coming back, which, as a long-term fan, I really am excited about this whole arc, just because the Darkstars were really kind of they were almost like a version of the Green Lantern Corps that at one point, John Stewart and Aricia and a couple of the other Lanterns actually joined the Darkstars. So I'm interested in seeing how Robert Venditti is going to bring them back, how he's going to make them a realistic threat for the Green Lantern Corps. And we kind of get the first part of that in this mini 2-arc story that's kind of a prelude. And then we've got the first issue, issue 44, that just came out, that kind of launches into the main story itself. But my opinions aside, Bill, what was your take on these 3 issues?
Oh, very good. I like it. It's the budding of something, but it kind of left me hanging at the end, of just the 3rd issue. So I say hanging because, I'll have to write you my notes for the next half of what the story is going to shape up to be. So for this podcast. So I did like where it is riding on that deeper theme of it solves a lot of problems. If you kill a repeat offender who's killing, you can save probably X number of lives down the road. But, or do you try to reform that person because there's hope that they would be, learn to make the right choice? And I thought that was a great theme that could give that long story form that we know Venditti to be very good at. That was like great. And even just the conflict you see in Hal is kind of coming out a lot more. And we've talked about how it was being hidden at in previous arcs. So it was interesting to see that come back. And I like Tomar too. He's almost like a perfect character to be in the, Dark Stars.
Yeah, I think that this is a very topical story. And I think, as comic fans, we always talk about Batman and the Joker and how many lives would Batman save if he just snapped the Joker's neck and got it over with? Because he's constantly getting out. And this kind of poses this question in to me, a very dramatic way. You've got Hal's relationship to Tomar 2, because Tomar 2's father was Tomar Ray, and Tomar Ray was the first Green Lantern, the alien Green Lantern, that Hal met besides Abin Sur, and so he feels a sense of responsibility because, Tomar Ray was killed during the Crisis on Infinite Earths by Goldface. And so he always kind of looked at Tomar 2 as, here's someone who I almost feel like I need to be a father figure to or a mentor to. And we see that come out here. And to see the two of them kind of philosophically opposed to each other, yet Hal is starting to, second guess the way he feels. And you're right. It's a callback back to that Hector Hammond story with Superman, where Hector Hammond wanted Superman to basically destroy him. And Hal's like, well, geez, maybe it would have made more sense to do that kind of thing. And he thinks about it for a half a second. And you see it here, I think, when Tomar 2's giving him a very compelling argument as to why the Dark Star point of view is the right one. I think it makes it very personal, and that makes it much more interesting. I think if you look at these 3 issues, there's not a lot of action in these 3 issues, but I still felt like I got a good story. You know what I mean?
Right. And there was a lot. It was weird because there wasn't a lot of, I would say, action. There was things going on, but it wasn't like the impact, you would either see just kind of a quick blast, but it was more, there's a lot more narrative to this one. But it worked, or at least I felt it moved. The stories moved pretty well.
Yeah. It didn't feel bogged down by the amount of dialogue at all.
No, it kind of was apt to what was going on. And I like that they're all going out, but I should say this is the double-edged sword that I think they're getting into, that I'm wondering how this is going to play out. I always get a little sketchy when it's okay, the solution is let's get a bunch of bad guys to help us take out these other bad guys. I feel like that nothing good can come from that.
Right. And we've been down that road a couple times before.
Well, isn't that how, in a sense, Tomar Ray got killed?
Right. I mean, that happened back, when was it? It was during the whole thing with the imposters taking over. And remember, we went and they got several old villains and they joined up with them. And I mean, that was not that long ago. It was only a couple of years ago. And, we're kind of back to that plot again. It's interesting in a way because Venditti's choosing characters, like the last time they did it, it was basically just some random characters they pulled up that they decided to use. And this time they're kind of calling back on things that occurred in previous issues. You've got John going back to General Zod. You've got Hal going back for Hector Hammond. You've got Kyle trying to call in his favor from Orion from when he kind of saved his life. And you got Guy hooking up with getting together with Arkillo again.
Right.
So it's neat to see that kind of those callbacks. It's kind of fitting that he's doing this in his final arc, because it's almost like it's one of those highlight reels where you see highlights of the previous episodes on a TV show. He's pulling back and calling back to stories that he's written throughout his run. And I think that's kind of neat. And I think it's just very serendipitous. I mean, he said that in an interview that this was a story he had been working on anyway. So it just kind of timed out right with his departure that we're getting kind of these callbacks. It's almost very fitting. It bookends everything he's done. So, I think it's kind of neat. I don't like you said, I don't necessarily like the idea of the strange bedfellows of hooking up with your villains to rally a team to go out there. But I'm willing to see where it goes. I think it's interesting that the Green Lanterns are in a position where we see these Darkstars' new ability, and they're kind of at a loss now how they're going to deal with these guys. And the teleportation thing is something brand new. I'm excited by it. And then in this first issue 42, I did just want to touch on one quick thing. That was an issue that was drawn by Ethan Van Sciver, and Ethan and DC Comics have parted ways. Ethan's contract with DC Comics expired, and I believe he's got one or maybe two issues that he's already drawn that he turned in, but he recently posted on his YouTube channel that he had just turned in his last work with DC, and he's going to be doing some independent stuff and some other things. So I'm kind of sad to see him go because it's like an end of an era. Ethan Van Sciver has been associated with Green Lantern since 2004. So it's the end of a long career with DC. I'm sure he'll be back at some stage, but it's interesting to I don't know. It just seems like right now we're in all this transition. You're leaving, Venditti's leaving, Ethan Van Sciver's leaving. So
yeah, no, it is. well, I think it's. It's time, and time needs, and everything needs a fresh start. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I think, now you made me sad, Myron.
This episode is going to be all about guilt trips.
The guilt trip issue, episode. What did you think of this, though? Kyle's going to lay it on thick with Orion. But what did you think about the pairings? I thought that was kind of telling to each of their personalities of who they were going. Like Hal needs Hector Hammond to kind of go with what Barry's thoughts are of that hope that somebody could turn to be good. And Kyle's going to like, hey, you know what? I'm always putting my life on the line for everyone else. I need somebody to call it in. You got John being the leader that he is, being able to deal with like taking on a very powerful guy, but beating him on a different level. And then you got Guy, who's going back to a frenemy and Arkillo, which speaks to his battle nature and how he's got friends in low places, and that has benefited him. So it was kind of interesting. Each of them, where they went was telling to their personalities as well.
Yeah, and it's funny when they showed Hal going off to Earth. I think the first thing I think jumped into my head, and maybe it did into a lot of other readers, was, oh, okay, here's a chance for him to touch base with Carol, mend fences, and bring Carol into the fray. But Hal, I think, is the kind of person that's not going to voluntarily bring her into it, and realizes that the amount of baggage they have, maybe she's not the right person to bring into this. I do hope that at some point he gets a chance to have that conversation before Venditti's off the book. But yeah, it is very telling. I think Hector Hammond to me was a surprise. I'm not sure who he would have gone to Earth for. Maybe Superman would have made sense. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with Hector Hammond. If he can control the minds of the Darkstars, he could really be the wild horse in this whole battle.
Oh yeah. Does he help, or does he,
right. Does he
turn it on him? Yeah.
Right. So I think that's really interesting. And, I love the part you talked about John Stewart and his interaction with Zod, and the whole thing with the kryptonite Knuckles.
Yeah.
Was great. I think like everybody else, I saw that scene and I was like, oh, he did a construct of Knuckles, and he's using the ring to time it just right to, maybe he found a weak spot in the back of the hand of a Kryptonian that he figured out how, if I time it just right, I can break a bone. But it really
just
was
like Guy Gardner and Hercules.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, it's the right angle.
It's the right angle. Yeah,
Hercules.
Okay, I got to jump out of this the commentary of this issue to talk about that story. When that story came out, and I criticized the whole arm wrestling thing, the writer of that book, and you know who I'm talking about because we've met him. He messaged me on Twitter and sent me a thing on Over the Top and how it's all about leverage and stuff, and that's how he won. And to me, it wasn't that he beat Hercules in arm wrestling. It was that he held him at a standstill for a half an hour. That was the issue I had because Guy Gardner's a human and Hercules has got superhuman strength. It wouldn't matter. He couldn't hold it for an hour. Come on. But he tried to on Twitter. He tried to lecture me about the science of arm wrestling. It's one of the most odd interactions I've had with a creator in the time doing this show and doing the blog. And it's funny because he deleted the tweets momentarily afterward, but I did get a screenshot of one of them, but it was funny. He was trying to lecture me. I thought it was humorous, but
you know, my son is 7, and if we arm wrestled, no matter what angle he took, I would still just beat him because I'm that much. I'm not Hercules, but it's a god versus a human. I just didn't get that. I'm sorry.
But anyway,
I digress.
We digress. But anyway, the issue 44, when we see Goldface, I was kind of surprised they killed Goldface off like that. But then again, when's the last time he was pertinent to anything? But it was cool to see him back.
What was Goldface's power?
He had the power of gold. No, he was think of him like Black Mask in Batman, where he's like a gangster type person. He just happened to have gold skin. He didn't really have any powers per se that I can recall. It's been a long time since I've seen him in anything, and hey, I'm I can't remember anymore. But I loved about this most recent issue. The thing that I loved the most about it was seeing Barry and Hal together again. I think there's a lot said about but Hal and Ollie Queen, the hard traveling heroes. But Barry really is Hal's best friend. He can help ground Hal, and you see this great conversation between them where Hal is comfortable enough with Barry to vocalize the inner conflict he's having, and Barry walks him through it and does what a good friend does. And I just really loved that whole sequence. To me, that was the highlight of the issue. That and seeing Guy Gardner walk into a bar and telling him to beer him.
Yeah, when he's like, and then he does the construct with the large finger. Beer me.
Yeah, beer me.
Yeah.
But I think it's in a good place. I think Venditti's run has been overly criticized because of the way that his New 52 run was. Looking back on it, I know I was not a big fan of the Lights Out arc. To me, this was his first entry into it, and he's taking away the whole wish fulfillment and the thing behind the Green Lantern rings and making the use of power rings a bad thing. And I didn't really like that whole thing at all. But I think since then, Robert Venditti's really got a good handle on these characters, and he's doing as good of a job as anybody possibly could in juggling all of the things that he's juggling. And you look here, I mean, this whole story is very tightly written as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you've got callbacks to Space Cabbie, you've got callbacks to old stories, and it isn't like he's just doing it to make them appear. There's very organic reasons why you see Space Cabbie show up, and there's very good reasons why Kyle would go and look for the Dew Gods, and there's very good reasons why Guy would go and try to find Arkillo. Because think about it, he might be able to pull the whole Sinestro Corps into the battle. Who knows?
Well, I mean, and again, Venditti kind of took over where Jeff Johns left, or well, not where exactly Jeff Johns left off, but really took it and took the characters into that deeper levels, that there's a lot more deeper understandings to the Green Lantern Corps than what there was with how Jeff Johns fleshed them out. So I think he was the right choice. I mean, hindsight's 2020, obviously, but I think now that we're coming to the end of his run, we're seeing like, wow, these are ripples that are going to have long lasting, effects.
Yeah, I'm really not looking forward to him being gone. I think he's been a very good writer. I think no matter who it was that DC brought in, it was going to be a tough job. I mean, following a run like Jeff Johns that's hard for any writer to come in, no matter how confident you are.
Right.
And I think he had a tough road to hoe, but I think he did a great job. And this arc, I'm really excited by it. This book has, and obviously I'm biased because I'm a huge Green Lantern fan, but this book has been my favorite book. I get more excited for the Wednesdays when these books come out than any other Wednesday of the month. And even though there's not a lot of action in these 3 issues, there's a lot of richness in the storytelling and the character beats, and I think it bodes very well. But it moves. Yeah, right.
They're like, they're I think the 44, the newest issue, was probably the beefiest as far as dialogue goes, but it was like the scenes were interesting and they kept you, the dialogue kept you in there, and and you can do that if you do it right, and Venditti's been doing it right.
Yeah, I agree. But anyway, I think great issues. I think you co-sign as well.
Oh no, absolutely. I'll have to let you know on the others, on the last set of them.
All right, well, let's take a quick break, and then we want to talk a little bit about the last so many years and
really some of all the highlights, if you will.
Yeah, we'll do a highlight reel. Yeah. All right, we'll be back after the break.
This is Razor, and you are listening to the blog of Oa. You need to keep listening, otherwise I will track you down with all of my skill, and you will feel my wrath.
And so, the end is nigh. This is the last episode, Bill, and we've got no more comics to talk about. So, I was just talking in the last segment that Barry is such a good friend to Hal, and if I could make the equation, you're the Barry to my Hal. So,
stop it! I'm the Arkillo to your guy.
It's been quite a journey, and you talked earlier about how we met, and we talked about maybe doing a show at one point, and this show has really been your baby from the beginning. It was your idea to do a podcast, and I had guested on the Raging Bulls podcast a couple of times, and I really had not given thought to doing anything other than the blog. So, this is something that I give you all credit for the creation of this show, and it will live on, and we will do more. It obviously will not be the same, but I hope it will still be entertaining for those that listen. There's been a lot of really neat moments. I mean, for us getting our first interviews with, the producers of the Green Lantern, the animated series. And then we got to do an interview at a convention and record it live for YouTube in the show, talking to Ethan Van Sciver, and we've talked to Robert Venditti and, just a host of other people. And that wouldn't be possible without that original nugget of an idea. So, I think the Green Lantern fan community is better off for your contributions.
Well, thanks for going along with my crazy idea. I think, and I think it was one of those things where, it's weird. This is a chicken and the egg kind of moment here, Myron. Because looking at what you were doing with the blog, I mean, this was a natural transition to the media, it was really just swapping in the mediums. You have an encyclopedic knowledge of Green Lantern, your fandom for Green Lantern. I can almost, I would feel is unmatched, with some of the other fans that we see out there on our Facebook and whatever. And there's some people who put some awesome pictures of stuff they've created and everything. But I have to say that, without you being the conduit for a fan base, and the knowledge that you bring there, and and doing it in a positive manner, not when a lot of podcasts, especially within the comics and comic culture, were almost like always cynical and negative, and excluded people by even just their maybe approach being like the use of language that, you probably wouldn't want to use, or things that you just don't want to say in front of families or what have you. I think having that kind of approach made you, attract people from all walks of life. And that's what's kind of cool if you look at our Facebook page, that was part of your idea, and the work behind of just understanding how to put that all together, and the stats. I mean, whatever me saying, hey, how about a podcast? Nothing comes close and compares to the effort and work and time and love that you have given it. I have birthed the baby, but you may have adopted it and raised it. So, I'm showing up like every once a month, being like, "Hey, what's up? Here's $5," and take it off. You're making sure it's in bed at night. It's taking its bath. You're keeping it. You are the torchbearer. So you are my Kyle to my Hal. No, and I think, whatever, you've tapped me into things like, I don't think in a million years I would have ever received a package of a sea foam lantern t-shirt. Somebody in Illinois, Brian DuPont is his name, an artist and graphic designer, and he's done comics and stuff. He's a good guy, and he sent us that package with green, who just took a small little line that we said, and hundreds of miles away, and just saying, hey, that's funny. I'm gonna put this together for them, and reached out to us. I think that's an experience that not everybody is always afforded, and I think we were blessed to be able to have those.
Yeah. I think that was one of the funnest moments, I think, of doing this show, is when we were joking around about the emotional spectrum, and we kind of were riffing on the idea of what's the next color, and seafoam, and it was going to be anxiety, and then we came up with the oath, and the next thing we know, Brian DuPont's done a logo and T-shirts, and
there's a picture, and there's it's just one of those things where little things like that can go so far, and it puts you in touch with people you would have never thought of, and
we've gotten voicemails and emails from Russia and Ireland, and people that you wouldn't think. I think when you and I started doing this, we're like, okay, we'll give it 5 episodes and see if anybody listens to it, but then you start getting responses from people, and people find what you do, and that's very, very rewarding, because for me, my goal for doing the website was I just wanted to be a good ambassador for the franchise. I wholeheartedly believe that I would not be on this planet if it wasn't for Hal Jordan as a character. And I don't want to go into too much detail, but birth defect, side effects, life-threatening incidences, that kind of stuff. And in those moments when you're a young child, you reach for inspiration where you can find it. And for me, Green Lantern was never about the physicality of the hero. It was about the willpower to overcome adversity and whatever challenges you get thrown at you. And to me, that's the core of that character. And that, in some of moments when I had life-threatening incidences, that's what kept me calm as a 7-year-old kid. That's what it was. And so now, as an adult and an aging adult, I have a sense of appreciation for that, and respect, and love, and genuine love for it, and want to be a good ambassador for it. I want people to get the same thing out of it I get out of it. That's part of it. And then the other part of it is, I want to have a legacy. I mean, at some point, the website's going to go dark, because when I'm gone from this world, who's going to pay the hosting fees? Or the same with the podcast. Doing a podcast, you spend money every month to have it hosted, and so on. It's an ongoing expense, but I pay it out of my pocket because I love the opportunity to engage with other people and other fans, and finding people who inspire me with their love of the character. That fuels the fire inside of me. So for me, that's what it's all about. But to see things like what Brian DuPont did, that was, to me, that was like a pinnacle. I'll be honest, to me, I was more excited by that kind of stuff than the interviews, even though the interviews are cool. It was the fact that somebody cared enough to do something and give back and share. To me, that was huge. The other, I got to say, one of the other high points to me was, we talked about how do we expose fans to characters they may not know the histories of? And I was doing these articles on the blog called Green Lantern 101, which I know I need to do a whole lot more of those, but trying to give a biographical background, and you're a very, very creative individual. So we started talking about, well, what can we do as a riff on this kind of stuff where we can inform readers in an entertaining way about the history of a character. And so I would give you some biographical facts, and then you would then write a script as a mock interview, as if we're going to Skype Oa and interview.
Oh, geez.
interview the characters. And your brother, who is an actor who has a voice recording studio, would record and come up with the voice. You'll hear in the bumpers, you'll hear Slack, and I think there's Slack and Guy Gardner that we have as bumpers. Those are your brother.
Yes.
And him creating the voices of the characters is a lot of fun, because to me it made it very alive, and that's really, really cool. I think for me personally, and I know we've talked about it before, but the time when there was a time when you just could not stand Guy Gardner. And
yeah.
and like every episode you were dumping on Guy Gardner. And so when we got ready to do a biography, I was like, well, what if we we're going to call and interview Slack or something, and instead Guy Gardner interrupts the call and receives the call because he's ticked off because he's tired of you dumping on him on the show. And that was the funnest thing, because your brother did such a great job, and you did such a great job of writing the dialogue where he was kind of insulting us, and he was really going at you, which was I just thought was hysterically funny.
Well, part of that wasn't so much acting, like Big Brother, but
But I think those are things that you bring to the show that can't be replaced, and but those are some of the funnest things. Even having your wife do the original. We're gonna on this episode, by the way, when you edit it, you need to use the original theme song, because your wife Dree did such a great job of doing the little podcast of Oa thing, and your brother recorded the dialogue, and I know we're using the Aya one these days, but as a throwback for this episode, I think we need to go back to the original theme song. Just as a throwback, but
I can do that.
You were able to bring those things in, which was great. To me, it's I've always been a bit of a loner, not always by choice. So to have the support of other people, your support and Dree's support and your brother's support, those things mean an awful lot to me, because I usually am one of those people who sits in a corner by themselves, and so to have people that are willingly giving something to help me accomplish something, that just means the world to me.
Well, thank you for that, and I understand that. I think that one of my favorite things to do. I wouldn't say I'm the most talented person in the world by any means, but I think I see talent, and I see talent in people, and I try to see the strengths in those people, and I think I saw a strength, and I think if anything, I hope that and me leaving this is more of just, I don't know if I would call it a 7-year itch, but it's just one of those where I'm now finding myself needing to branch out and have to control my time at certain things. But I'm so happy to hear that you are going to have Phil coming on, because to know that this continues, and the work that you put in and the talent that you offer of bringing fans together and putting, being a historian basically for something that gives a lot of people inspiration, I think is important, and I think it's, I call it me getting you out of your corner or inviting people to your corner. I was happy to be a part of it, and I hope to help along the lines when you need it, and continue it. So I'm appreciative of that, and I thank you for letting me kind of ride on your talent there a little bit.
Well, I think people have probably turned the show off about 5 minutes ago, but
they're like, "Oh God, when are they gonna kiss?"
All right, well, let's wrap this up, and we'll be back in a few moments to wrap everything up in a nice little bow.
This is Giancarlo Volpe, producer of Green Lantern, the animated series, and you're listening to the podcast of Oa.
So, Bill, this ends episode 120, and I don't want to continue to drag this out, but it's been a very fun ride, and I think I speak for every listener that we wish you all the best, and we hope you'll come back and visit and play in our playhouse that we've created together. I usually close the show, and it seems only fitting that this time around you get the last word, not me. So I'm going to say goodbye, and I'll be back in a couple weeks and with Phil, and we'll debut Phil, and I'll see you guys in a couple weeks. But Bill, why don't you lead us in our final exit of the episode?
Well, if I had to say anything, I just want to say thank you to everyone who is listening. I think you guys have motivated us to do, I can't say I've done 120 hours of anything. And that's including like schoolwork and degrees and stuff like that. So to be able to say I did 120 episodes over a span of about 7 years with a person I call friend, and be able to do that at a certain, to have that luxury to do that, and then to have people actually listen to it and stuff like that. I mean, that's awesome, and I'm very appreciative of that. And I think it's great that, it's moving on, and I think Phil's going to do a great job. I can't wait to hear you guys. And so I think if I had to say anything, I'm going to quote Saint Walker and say, all will be well.
The Podcast of Oa is the official podcast of the Blog of Oa and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. And Skype users can leave a voicemail on the show's account, Blog of Oa. Emails can be sent to greenlantern@stny.rr.com. And you can also find the Blog of Oa and the Podcast of Oa on Facebook and Google+. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of Oa and the Podcast of Oa are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.